Hello and welcome to the 91st gathering of the Adventure Party on this, the 29th of April, 2018. I'm your party leader, Brad Ludwig. We ask that you peace tie your swords, holster your blasters, and make sure you keep your ABS separate from your PLA before joining us at the meeting table. Our guest tonight, you're hearing ABS, PLA, what's that all about? We're going to be talking with Dave Garacci of Polygon Forge, LLC, and we're going to be talking about 3D printing and games. And I'm really excited about 3D printing in general. And Dave, tell us about Polygon Forge and what you do.
Well, I started out in architecture. So my background is architectural design, and I also do a lot of illustration work for architects and developers. So we do a lot of 3D modeling, a lot of, you've heard of CAD,
Sure.
Really sort of 2D, but we've advanced that into BIM, which is Building Information Modeling, or BIM. And that's a little more advanced version of 3D modeling, where when you're creating something, like say you're building a house, for example, the walls and windows and elements that you build in 3D actually have some data associated with them. So the object can be, clicked on in a model, and then you can bring up who makes that,
Sure,
cost, how many the project needs. So instead of just building a model and presenting a pretty picture to a developer or something, you're actually creating an information database of a building, which you can then use to help build the building faster or more efficiently. So with that as sort of a background, I started to get into taking my love for games and whether it was board games or video games or whatever, and trying to incorporate some of the 3D that I'd been doing on the computer into gaming. And it wasn't that hard to do because there were some other people already trying to do it. And for a long time, many of the miniatures that we've seen, whether it was from somebody like Games Workshop or one of the other larger manufacturers, they're already using 3D to build a lot of their miniatures. So they'll sculpt them and then they'll scan them in, or sometimes they'll just build them in 3D. So those two things kind of go together.
Sure. What's really exciting about 3D printing, is having the ability to be able to, not everybody is, a 3D artist that can fully actualize maybe a character that they could print and use as a miniature for, a game that they're playing, but there's the possibility of that. And there are companies that are popping up that kind of help people do things like that.
Yep.
So it's really nice to be able to see folks that really want to get their hands into things and even making, more than just drawing out a map or something like that, actually creating and helping people visualize what they're talking about as they're doing their games. And seeing that technology get into homes now, or at least it's a little bit easier and a little less cost prohibitive to get some of these 3D printers into the homes and have people be able to do that, or maker shops around the nation that they're starting to pop up where people can have access to that technology and do things like that. So
yeah, there's a number of opportunities out there right now that just a few years ago people didn't really imagine they would be able to jump on. And whether it's going to some place like a Home Depot and buying a 3D printer, which is kind of amazing to me that's an option now, or saving your pennies and getting something that's a little higher quality. It's obviously it's what your budget can afford and what you're trying to do, and we can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's definitely in the home market at least, it's sort of like, it reminds me of some of the past technologies that we've had, like CB radios. When that came out, it took a special kind of person to go out and get the equipment and build the radio or buy a radio and use it and learn the technology. And 3D printing is not that different. If you really want a 3D print right now, for a few $100s, you can get a printer, and it's going to take some time. Like any other hobby, you're really going to have to spend, some time to research and to deal with maintenance on your machine or whatever. But anybody can really do it at this point if they've got their mind set. Now when it comes to gaming, like you were saying, there's different levels. So different printers are going to allow you to do different things. But
Yep.
I've seen people use a $200 printer to create miniatures for D&D or some of the other games that are out there, and they look pretty good.
Sure.
Yes, you can go to someplace like Hero Forge. There's a couple of online sites where you can go and build your character. It's very cool, and the price of the characters, the models, it's a little more than if you're going to go to a store and buy a miniature, but you're actually able to custom make that based on the models and accessories that they have on the site.
Yeah, I've played around with Hero Forge quite a bit, and they do give you the option to, for I think it's like around $10, you could, instead of printing it for $10, you can get the file that
Yes.
you can download that, and if you have a printer, you could print that out, and that's just to be able to have access to customizable miniatures like that is just, it's mind blowing.
Yeah, and
To
it
me.
relates to what you were saying before. Not everybody can do the 3D modeling. Not
Yeah,
everyone, like I've been doing this for 20 years. Not everybody has that, ability or the chance to be able to get the software or whatever. So
yeah,
having a website like that set up is great. I think I saw them the first time at Gen Con a couple of years ago when they were just getting things going. And you knew at that point that it was going to be something that was going to be pretty cool. And they've really taken it like, I mean, it's awesome. I know some people that will join gaming groups now, and when they hear about it, they'll just jump on there. And yeah, it might cost you 20 or 30 bucks to get a nice fig, but this thing looks really high quality. It's not like what you're going to get on a home, inexpensive printer. You're going to get
yeah.
something that's very smooth and high quality from them. So yeah, you're going to pay a little bit more, but again, you get what you pay for. So.
Yep. No, exactly. And we'll get into some of the different processes, whether it's um, the more typical, that's the plastic extrusion, I guess. Yeah, I'm trying to make sure I got
So,
my terminology right.
Fused deposition modeling, or FDM, is what we
Okay.
would call the sort of spool-based plastic printer. And it's
Okay.
going to use anything. I mean, nowadays they have everything from very inexpensive plastic, like the PLA we were mentioning before, or ABS, which is a little harder. It's a little harder to print. You need a different type of printer head to do it. So a little higher quality printer to use ABS. But I mean, they have wood, they have metallic plastics. There's all different types of materials now that you can print
And,
with.
ceramics, I've
Yeah,
seen.
yeah, ceramics. You could do lost wax printing now, where you
Yes.
can actually create, like you've done a 3D miniature, you can create the master and then use that to create metal miniatures or, other materials, I guess. So, that's one of the nice things about FDM. At a lower level, at a lower cost to get into that product, you can buy materials that are going to be much, more interesting and kind of more fun than some of the things you're going to get with the other two printer types.
Sure.
So again, lower cost, a lot of different materials options. The downside with FDM printing sometimes is the speed, but also when things go wrong, they really go wrong sometimes. So, if you're trying to print an object and suddenly the print head misses a beat or the head's a little bit too low or a little bit too high, you can have, a few hours later, a massive spaghetti of plastic on your printer. It happens, a lot. Or sometimes the print just, will stop for some reason. I mean, we can get into the downsides of the printing later, but yeah, so FDM is great, and that's a great starting point.
Sure.
And I have a very inexpensive FDM printer, and I like it. It's fun. It breaks every once in a while, and I need to become like the engineer.
Yeah.
Somebody call Scotty, because now it's time for me to go down and try to fix what's wrong. And sometimes it's wires, sometimes it's a software issue, but usually it's the hardware. But again, you pay $200 for a printer, it's going to work great for a while, and then you're going to start to have issues with it. That's just the way it is. But the miniatures look pretty nice. If we had video, I'd show you some of them, but it's basically, in my opinion, what you can get off of the less expensive printers is good enough for game night.
Sure.
You're not going to maybe want to sell those to someone else, but you know, they're the kind of miniatures that you're going to be able to throw down and no one's going to know. They're going to say, wow, that's really cool, you know, bed or chair that you have there. Where'd you get that awesome miniature? Well, I printed it last night. I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. So
Yeah, and then I'd love to talk about SLA if you do any
yeah,
stuff
so the
with
other
that.
printer that I have is a Form 1 Plus, which is an SLA printer.
Oh.
And the SLA printer is a different process than the FDM printer. So SLA uses a laser, and the laser is, sorry, hard to describe this over audio, but the laser is shot at a mirror inside of a box, and the light from that mirror bounces up onto a plate of glass. And that plate of glass, it has a tray of resin on top of it. And this resin is a gooey sort of viscous liquid. You buy it in a large bottle. It's actually rather expensive. Was it 100 milliliters? Or no, I'm sorry, 1,000 milliliters was like $150 or something. It varies in price, and there's different manufacturers for it, so you can find some less expensive stuff. But straight from the manufacturer, it's pretty pricey. But when the printer prints, instead of squirting this plastic onto a flat bed and building up layer upon layer to create this object, it shoots a laser at this liquid on the glass, and it burns the plastic where the laser hits it to create the object layer by layer. So instead of building, you know, sort of from nothing and building up, a lot of these printers will build down. So the print starts to rise out of the goo as it's creating the object.
So it
Very
prints it
cool
upside
spot.
down, actually, which is really
Yeah, it comes out upside down, exactly.
yeah.
It's fun. It's quiet. It's, you know, the downside is that it kind of smells bad. You can have that same thing with FDM printing. You know, with some of the plastics that we use to print, like ABS, for example. If you want to build a wrench, you're going to use ABS. If you want to build a fig, you're going to use PLA. Now, if you want to build something that you can throw around, I guess, you know, if you want to build a prop, let's say for, you know, a LARPing session, then you're going to want to use ABS. But that is going to burn a lot hotter. You need to get the temperature up higher on your printer, and it's also going to start to stink up your room as you start.
Sure.
So, you know, but resin will do that as well. I had to install a vent in my print room that vented out of the building so that I was not, you know, having to breathe in these fumes. It gets pretty rough sometimes. And again, it depends on the plastic. I've had a resin that I printed with for a while that was a rubber resin. So we were having problems with the miniatures, and this is something about SLA that people should know. SLA printers and resin-based printers will create a print that's brittle. It's the kind of thing that if you drop that miniature from, say, 3 or 4 feet up from the table, when it hits the tabletop, it's probably going to crack and break. A metal miniature is not going to do that. Even some of the plastic miniatures, like some of the 40K stuff I used to play with, like you could drop that and a gun might break off or something, but it's not going to shatter. With some of the resin miniatures, you know, it does have that chance of happening. So, you know, again, quality of material is important, but depending on what you're trying to do, you know, you're going to have to choose what type of printer you want to use.
Yeah, absolutely. I really can't wait to talk to you more in depth about this because I'm so fascinated by 3D printing technology. What we're going to do then is we're going to do our, oh, hey, Glenn, you're here.
I'm here.
Hi. Sorry, I just get so excited about 3D printing and stuff like that. I geek out and I totally forgot to introduce you, Glenn. Hey, how you doing?
I'm just fine. Thanks.
I'm just going to mute my microphone for a while, and then when you're ready for me, then I'll turn it back on.
It's all good. Okay. So we're going to do our regular roundtable review. Let's see. We're going to start with your new game here by ELO. Nice. And the game is called?
Was that my cue?
That's your cue.
The game is Decrypto. This is a game for 3 to 8 players. It plays usually 15 to 45 minutes, depending on the number of players and how many rounds you want, or how many rounds you want to play. and it retails for $20. So in Decrypto, you are split into two teams, and you are trying to correctly interpret coded messages that are presented to you by your teammates, while at the same time trying to crack the code that you're intercepting from the opposing team. So the way this works is that each team has a screen, and in that screen you're going to tuck 4 cards that are in pockets. They're numbered 1 through 4. So you may have your 4 words may be pig, candy, tent, and sun. And then you get a 3-digit code you have to transmit to your team. So I will have a code, and I want my team to guess the numbers that I'm trying to submit. I will then, so if it's, say, for example, my code is 421, I may give my team clues such as Sam, striped, and pink, hoping they then can correctly map my clues to the right words. So Sam going for sun, because that's the 4th word, striped going for candy, and pink going for pig, because pigs are pink. You can get striped candy, and you might have a son named Sam. If your team guesses the numbers correctly, great. You get, that's great. If you don't, you get a black mark to show that your team failed. Starting the second round, you give, again, give a clue about your words to match your number code. So now I might have 2, 4, and 3. So you might say sucker, again for candy, prince for sun, and steak for tent. The other team is trying to guess what your numbered code is, and they do this by they're taking notes, whether mental or actually you can write them down, as to, because they don't know what the they don't know what pig, candy, tent, and sun are, but they might start to put together what the clues have in common. So here you've said you said sucker, you said striped. It's like later on you're saying candy, and you might say like lollipop or something like that, or M&M, something like that. Then they're gonna start to understand. Okay, now when we go, okay, they just said Milky Way. Well, okay, now we know what this is. We know what number that is, and they're gonna try to guess. Usually you go about 4 to 7 rounds. If no one has won after 8 rounds, each team attempts to guess the other team's words. Whichever team guesses more words correctly wins. But usually it doesn't last that long. Usually people have figured it out. It usually starts around like the 4th or 5th turn. Someone starts guessing correctly.
Okay.
So, and you get to guess each turn. If you guess correctly, you get a success. If not, again, you get a black mark of failure. Black mark of failure.
The black mark of failure.
Yeah. So this is taking like the concept that you had with like code names, and taking it a step further. Because now there's you really have to think a lot more, because now you're trying to interpret what these different clues mean in different orders every time, and how you can then cycle them back to what the words are. So I'm liking it a lot. I am finding, though, it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
Because some people don't like to think quite this hard. But for those people who like, breaking codes and this type of thinking, it's a lot of fun. And it's $20.
Looking at the replayability, the possibilities for that, for a $20 game that, and I love puzzles. My son and I are both kind of getting into, he and I will do word searches together. So I've got like a word search on my phone, and we'll, just kind of go back and forth and do word searches. And I don't know, puzzles that make you think, just they're so good for your brain.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I use my brain enough. So it's nice to be able to play games like this that really kind of make you use the gray matter that you got before you lose it, sort of a thing. So I really dig doing stuff like that. So Yellow Games, Decrypto.
Yep.
3 to 8 players, which that's got to be a heck of a game. So I'm assuming it's 4 and 4 then. as teams, correct? Or do you have more than 2 teams?
No, it's just 2 teams.
Okay.
Because you only have two of the screens. So.
Oh, and it says right here, 2 teams. You know, if I actually like read, that would be we'd be doing great here. 15 to 45 minutes. That's a respectable time for a game. I mean, if you want to get a few games in the course of an evening, that's a sweet amount of time there.
Yeah,
and 20
it's
bucks.
also the perfect amount of time to ruin a friendship. So right about that time too. I'm sorry, to not ruin a friendship. You start getting longer games like Diplomacy, and then you'll have people storm out of the sale. You'll never see them again.
Yeah. Now, Diplomacy is, I think it was strictly designed to break friendships or test them thoroughly.
Yeah, we called it the friendship ender. So yeah.
All right. Well, hey, thank you for introducing us to Decrypto.
Absolutely.
I'm like creating a list now, so the next time I get up to Milwaukee to visit you, I'll just like vomit out a whole bunch of money at you and take a whole bunch of games
back. If you want to try Tofu Kingdom, I know someone with the name Eliza who has a copy.
Excellent. Then I will have to stop by the Baltzell homestead and give that a whirl. All right. Well, thank you, Glenn.
Absolutely.
Speaking of games and gaming, which is what this is all about, the folks at Die Hard Dice do dice very well for gamers. I am so pleased with everything that I have ever gotten from Die Hard Dice, and we've gotten a lot. My fiance and I have the portable dice trays. We've got so many sets of dice, and they're introducing new dice all the time. And we've got a wedding to pay for, and I'm like, man, I really would love to get this set of dice, but I'd also, like to make sure everything's like ready to go, and I don't have to sell plasma to pay for the wedding. So what you can do to help, and by all means, what they have to offer, high quality, low price, and you get the polyhedral sets that are plastic. You can get metal dice, and they're at least half the cost of most other companies that I see out there, but the quality is incredibly high. Please go to dieharddice.com and check out what Todd and his team have available. And if you use the code at checkout time, Adventure Party, all one word, Adventure Party, you get 10% off your total order. So check out what Todd has at dieharddice.com. Use the checkout code Adventure Party. Take a look at what they have available, because they're introducing new stuff, I swear to God, every 2 weeks. It's well worth checking it out. So there you go. The Kickstarter Spotlight. Last week we spoke with Mac Bouvet for the Indiegogo project that she has running right now for the web series Typecast, and they're doing pretty good. Now, the way that they've got this set up is it's not like an all or nothing. It's a flexible goal. So everything that they take in will be used for the series to make as much of it as they possibly can. And right now they're sitting at just a little over 5,000. And I really want to see this series very badly, and I can't wait until it comes out. So they're ticking along. There's still 12 days left as of today, April 29th. So get in on that. Go to Indiegogo. Now, normally we do Kickstarter. We call this the Kickstarter Spotlight. Yes, I know we're talking about Indiegogo. The concept's still the same. But go to Indiegogo.com and take a look at Typecast, a comedy about monsters in Hollywood. And throw some money their way, because she's got a good thing going on here, and it's a great concept, and it's to be a part of something like this is really kind of cool. I am looking forward to it. Mm-hmm. So, Typecast. Take a look. 12 days to go. This week, we're going to talk about Miskatonic University, the Restricted Collection board game. Now, we've spoken before. You and I are H.P. Lovecraft nerds. Mm-hmm. I don't know if Dave has read any of the H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. There you go. So,
got the Call of Cthulhu RPG sitting on my shelf over there. So.
Oh, nice. Very nice. Yeah, this is also being done by Chaosium. And it is a very interesting board game where unspeakable evil, as always, comes a-knocking, and you've got to get into the restricted collection at the library to try to thwart said ancient evil. And they were looking. It's not done yet, but their core pledge that they wanted to hit was 25,000. As of today, with 8 days left to go, they're sitting at just under 65,000. So they've been really ticking along with this, and I encourage you guys, if you're a fan of H.P. Lovecraft, check it out at Kickstarter.com, because the concept, the structure is all really, it's really interesting. And of course, sanity comes into play, as it always does with the H.P. Lovecraft, anything, H.P. Lovecraft. The gameplay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I've been excited for this since I had former guest James Louder in.
Oh, okay.
In the store a while back, we were talking about Chaosium in general, because he's working for Chaosium now. Mm-hmm. And yeah, he just hinted at this, and I'm like, oh, do more than that, and now here it is. So.
Now, the nice thing, $25 gets you the printed game. Now, that's incredibly reasonable. For something like this. It's the full printed game with all the expansions and the stretch goals. $25, you're in. Now you could do, and this is really kind of interesting, for $45 you could get in at the librarian level and get 2 copies. You could get in at the $125 gets you 10 copies. It's just really, the structure here is really kind of interesting. But if you get the chance, check it out. Check out the gameplay. It seems like it clicks along pretty well. It is not a slow-paced game. And it just, oh God, I'm really looking forward to it. And the game box looks like a tome, like a book that you would have on the shelf. They really thought about a lot of things here, different aspects of making this as immersive and as interesting as possible. So, is this one that you're looking to get in at the store ASAP?
Oh yeah, we'll definitely have this at the store. Not a doubt.
Yeah, I'm just. The more I look at it, the more I'm like, when is November going to get here so I can play it? Well, there you go. Our recommendation, Kickstarter Spotlight, Miskatonic University, the Restricted Collection board game. Yeah, Chaosium. There's nothing more to say. If Chaosium's working on it, you know that it's going to be legit. It's going to be good and worth the $25. I mean, only $25 to get this game.
I mean, the designer, Rainer Knizia, has done a couple of things. I mean, he is an Spiel des Jahres winner, and he's in the Origins Awards Hall of Fame. And, I mean, he's made a couple of good games.
So there you go. It's even got an excellent pedigree. So it's totally legit. All right. So there we go. The Kickstarter spotlight for this week. Now, speaking of spotlights, we're going to turn the spotlight back on our guest, Dave Garacci, and talk more about 3D printing and its applications for games. Now, we've talked a little bit about printer types, but let's get back to it again. The core one that you've been talking about has been the FDM, correct?
Yep.
That's a kind of quote unquote traditional plastic spool.
Yeah, it's sort of where it started from the standpoint of, what the average guy could get into.
Sure.
Guy or girl.
And would you say that those materials have come a long way?
Oh, I think so. I think the first time that I saw an FDM style print was probably 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty rough. They didn't have a lot of different filament types. And the quality of the prints were not that great. But at this point, there are so many different materials to choose from, and so many more companies that have gotten into it. There are companies that just focus mainly on more organic, friendly to the environment types of filaments. There are companies that focus on metal type filaments. There are companies that focus on wood, and they're pretty easy to get hold of out there from the various sources that are online, or even at just hardware stores now. I mean, there's a lot out there. You're not going to have that great of a choice, obviously, if you run over to your hardware store, but there's still the possibility is actually there. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and when you talk about like the biodegradable is not really the term I want to use, but the more environmentally friendly type materials. I mean, they have stuff that is based off of bamboo. I've seen stuff made out of coffee.
Yeah. I mean, and there's the whole food market too. I mean, there are different printers that will print specifically food, and other printers that can be modified to be able to print food. And again, it's we call it food. I'm not sure that it's not high cuisine or anything, but
Sure.
The fact that you can do it is pretty cool.
Yeah, and
those have its uses, I guess.
And even thinking about with all the discussion about trying to get us to Mars or more long distance journeys, having technology like this available, to be able to have like core material to work out of and be able to print other things out of it has got to be a great addition to something like that.
Yeah, it's a big game changer. I mean, I think it was only a couple of years ago when they printed the first wrench out on the International Space Station.
Yeah, I remember that. And that was what type of that used like it was like it would make passes and it had like a powder around it.
So that was we talked about FDM printing, which is the fused deposition printing, and it's again, that's sort of the standard, what people are used to seeing and what's out there at a lower cost. And then we talked a little about SLA, which is stereolithography, and that uses the resin, sort of the gooey liquid to print. And then the other type is called SLS, which is selective laser sintering. And that basically uses a powder. They used to use like a gypsum powder. There's different types out there now. But this powder is put in a bin. And much like with the other laser printing, it uses a laser to burn that material into the object or the shape that you want layer by layer. I believe it's a little faster, but it tends to be more expensive. And I think the nice thing about it is that you can reuse the powder again and again. So there's some structural issues with 3D printing. With FDM printing or SLS or SLA, it doesn't matter. If you're printing objects, let's take figs, for example. If you're printing a fig that has an arm or a sword that's hanging out, in order to print that element that's hanging off, you need some sort of support to keep it from falling over when you're printing the object, because it takes a little while for the plastic to cool. And if you don't have a support piece there, the sword will start to bend and droop down, and nobody really wants that. So what you're going to end up doing is have to provide a structural element or little stands that will be printed as you're printing the object to hold up those different pieces. So the nice thing about, to get back to what I was trying to say, the nice thing about SLS is that the powder acts as the structural element that holds your print in place. So with the other two types of printing, you need to create that structural support to hold those pieces up. And both with FDM, more so with SLA, or the resin-based printer, you lose that material. When you build that structure, you take it off of the print when you're done, and you have to throw it away. With FDM printing, you can take that extra support material, and if you've got the experience or the material, or the machine, you can melt it down and try to make your own filament and reuse that stuff. But with the resin-based printer, you can't reuse that material. So the nice thing about SLS, using a powder base, is that you've got that structure already there, and you can just keep reusing it so you don't lose anything. But again, that's a much more expensive printer, and they don't really have any home-based options for that type of printer yet. Although the company that makes the Form 1 and the Form 2, which are both SLA laser-type printers, they are supposedly coming out with what you'd call a prosumer, not quite consumer, not quite fully professional, sort of fits in the middle there. It's probably a $10,000 machine or something, 15, that you're going to be able to use to print with this powder.
I just there was a time where even to say that you could print something like that and the machine would only cost $10,000 would be mind-blowing. I just really trying to put this into perspective. We were talking before the show started that my fiance and I had gotten on board with a Kickstarter with a 3D printer called KubiBot, which could print essentially a 5-inch cube for all intents and purposes. That's the print area that it has. 5 or 6 years ago, to say, I'm going to get something like this and I've invested $350, people would have said you were crazy. There's no way that you could get a 3D printer for $350. It's ridiculous. But, as the technology improves, as, these materials become more readily available. We talked about being able to print with ceramic type material. I saw filaments that were like brass based, so you could kind of print in a brass metallic filament. And they offer so many different things now that it's becoming an art form unto itself, because you can make your own object and then choose the material in which you want to craft it out of.
Yeah, and there are people making their own filament as well. You can do it. It's a more intense process, obviously, but the cost has come down as well on a lot of those filaments. So I don't remember when the last time was that it's been a few months, but I think I probably paid half what I would have paid 2 years ago for the same.
Sure, I bet.
So the prices have really gone down, and it's the same thing with the higher end SLA printers. With that, the resin cost is going down because more and more smaller resin type printers are available, so they're less expensive. More consumers are going out and buying them, and that allows the price of the resin to go down because more people are purchasing the material. So
sure. And I do watch some YouTube videos, and there was I love looking at people that work with miniatures, and not just like gaming miniatures, but also like HO scale, things like that for as a train hobbyist. And there's a gentleman in the UK who has a SLA printer that he uses, and he kind of runs through his process for using this particular printer that he enjoys working with. And he was saying that the print takes X amount of time, and it doesn't matter how many objects that you put in this. It takes like 9.5 hours for him for the whole thing to print. So he'll try to lump a few things together that will fit comfortably within that printer, because it's going to take the same amount of time regardless. And if if he's going to be using something at some point in the future, it just kind of makes sense if you're going to pour that resin. And that resin, once you pour it out, and it can only be out for 2 days before it goes bad, at least the resin that he was using.
Wow.
So,
yeah, the stuff that I use lasts a little bit longer than that, but they give it a shelf life of about a year.
sure.
And once you've got it out in the tub or the resin tray, you don't want it to be in there for more than about a month or so.
Okay, sure.
And there's two reasons for that. It's partly the resin, but it also has to do with the tray. Most of the trays have a material on the glass that's like a rubber material that sort of scans through and that the material builds onto. And if you leave the resin on that material for too long, you start to degrade.
Sure.
And then you're going to end up with errors as you try to print. I've printed with SLA for a little over a year, and I've had some really great prints. There have been times when it hasn't printed the way it should. It is a harder printer to maintain because it uses mirrors and a laser. And the mirrors have to be perfectly clean in order for you to get a perfectly, 3D printed object. So it requires maintenance anywhere from once a week, depending on your environment, to maybe you could get away with maybe once a month if you're in a very dust-free type of an environment. It's kind of scary once you have a nice printer like that because you start to take it apart and you have issues with it. I've had to take mine apart to clean the mirrors, and you are literally shaking trying to clean this mirror that costs $1,000. So you don't necessarily want to have any issues. I've had to send my machine back to the manufacturer for repairs after I think about 9 months or so because it just got dirty and there's things that had to be tweaked to get it back to normal operating parameters. So it is a really nice printer, and when you print miniatures with that, they look like they were plastic injected. There are no, if you got a magnifying glass or a microscope, you can see the lines, but we're talking about a very, very thin striation on the surface of the object, so it's almost smooth. And I've done this because I build, as you were saying, HO scale models before. I build models, whether they're HO scale or larger scale models, as well as gaming miniatures. And you will need to use a little bit of sandpaper to sand down that miniature. You just got to be careful, But with a more expensive, again, we're looking at anywhere from $2,500 to maybe $4,500. With a more expensive SLA printer, you're able to take away most of that sanding time. Most of the finishing time is gone.
Yeah.
With an FDM printer, you've only paid $500 maybe, but you are going to spend, half an hour cleaning that model up because you're going to have to sand those edges down. Or there are companies like Smooth On is a resin manufacturer. They do a lot of props and they some people will use them to create miniatures as well. But you can buy a material from them. I think it's called XTC 3D or something. But you actually paint your miniature with that. Paint is a very thick paint that settles into the cracks of the miniature, and then you can sand that down and get a very smooth finish. I've used it. It's a really nice material to be able to put on your miniatures. But again, that's more cost to try to print something that is smoother. So really, in my opinion, it's good if somebody's really just starting to get into 3D printing to start with the cheaper alternative, which is the FDM printer. And some of those are pretty expensive as well. You can get a really nice one, with 2 or 3 heads, with the heated bed, which allows the print to stick better. There's a lot of different options out there. It depends on how serious you are and what kind of budget you have.
So we've been talking a lot about the printers themselves. You can't print nothing. So what do you recommend for somebody who's first time out? They want to get in on 3D printing. They're interested. They get a printer of their choice, but now they've got to make something. What would you recommend for the first time user or somebody that just wants to get their feet wet to try to figure this out?
I look at it in a couple of different ways. And my answers are always going to be that way. So I'm going to do my best to simplify what I'm trying to say here.
That's fine.
My background was a lot of 3D. So for me, When I build a model, I use the software that I'm familiar with and what I'm comfortable with. So if somebody already has some 3D skill at this point and you're used to using a certain software, stick with that, because there are so many different converters out there that pretty much anything you build in 3D in any software now can be converted into the file format you need to 3D print. And we should talk about that briefly, but not to get into too much technical detail. The standard 3D print file is called an STL, or stereolithography file, and STL files are prevalent now. Honestly, if you do a little search on the internet, you can probably find most models for most games at this point at some level.
Yeah.
So I know folks that have been, for the last couple of years, printing extra miniatures for games that they play. So somebody might go out and build a 3D model of a Space Marine or something, but they've tweaked the model to add a special weapon that you can't buy.
Sure.
And so somebody can download that and print it. So if you're somebody who just got a 3D printer and you don't have 3D modeling skills, your best choice is to go to Thingiverse or one of the other 3D hubs that are out there that have free models. Check to make sure it's a model that can be 3D printed. There are a lot of free 3D models out there. Some of them aren't made for 3D printing.
Oh, yeah.
Some of them are made just for show. They're made for rendering, an illustration opposed to a 3D print. And those models aren't going to print as nice. So, but if you go to Thingiverse, if you go to one of these other sites that has a lot of free models and you're not planning to make any money from this, you're just going to print this for personal use, you can download these models and send them directly to your printer, usually without too much tweaking, and you'll get a really nice print.
Yeah, I've checked out. And of course, this is it's on my work computer that I look at it. But I look at Thingiverse. My Mini Factory, I think, is.
Yep. That's another one that's out there. Mm-hmm.
Shoot, and there's another one too, and I can't remember what it is offhand. It is amazing to see, communities like that offer so much. I mean, literally, you can think up something that you're like, oh man, I'm really interested in this, and type it into the search and see what people given to the community to use and print.
There's a lot of stuff out there. I mean,
oh yeah,
crazy. So that's, in my opinion, that's sort of your first step. If you just got a 3D printer and you're not a 3D modeler, or you're just getting into it, go to one of the websites that has free models and print that, because that's going to get you to where you want to go fastest. The next step, if you're somebody who wants to get into 3D modeling, is to find one of the free software packages that are out there and learn that software. And there's a lot of different ones out there. There's a program called SketchUp that I point a lot of people to because it's a very simple modeling program. And I'm not going to get into the details of how it works or anything. I used to teach 3D modeling for a number of years at the local art college. So I could lecture this, on this forever. I'm not going to do that. Okay. So SketchUp is a free program. There are a number of different other free programs like Blender. If you do want to spend a little bit of money, there are other packages out there that are going to give you that, there's a learning curve, obviously, but it's going to give you a nice quality product when you're done. If you're the kind of person that's willing to spend the time, really just kick back and make this kind of a hobby, picking up the software and learning it is, going to take you a couple of weeks probably, because you're not going to build anything too complex. But if you're somebody that wants to make your own minis with swords and chainmail and, crazy wolf head or something, your other option is you're probably not going to be able to build that yourself with the software that's out there right now. But you could go to a place like Hero Forge or one of these other websites that will actually do 3D prints for you, and you might be able to download that as well. For a certain fee or whatever, you can sort of form the model that you want online and then download that for a fee and then print that on your printer. That's probably a really good option for somebody who doesn't have a lot of skill or at least a lot of knowledge yet on how to use the 3D software, because that's already there for you.
Hey, that's me.
Yeah.
No skill or knowledge.
And I mean, honestly, just to pick on that website, the Hero Forge one, they have so many options out there. And I know some people that have created their minis and printed them from those guys, and they looked great. I mean, they were spectacular. The other option, I'm just going to keep throwing out options here. The other one that I can think of is 3D hubs. Or again, finding a friend, maybe somebody you know on Facebook or one of the other social media sites that does 3D printing or 3D modeling, and paying them or asking them to help put something together for you that you can print on your printer. Again, there's a lot of different options. It just depends on your sort of comfort factor with what you're doing. I have a friend of mine that he's got a great job as an engineer. He works all day. He comes home and he loves to tinker with his 3D printer. And it's awesome. The stuff that he's created blows me away. I'm the kind of person that kind of wants the printer to just work most of the time. And I don't really want to spend a lot of time tweaking it, So if you can tell, I've gone like down that road in the past. And I'm at the point now where I've sort of pulled back a little bit. And I'm like, I want to spend time building stuff and creating things and designing things. I don't want to spend a lot of time at 2 a.m. trying to figure out why my printer isn't squirting plastic the right way or something, So it's a personal thing, for a lot of people. What do I want to do? How much time do I want to spend on it? I visited a couple of friends' homes, and there's a 3D printer in the corner with lots of dust on it. I have one in my house back in the corner, so how much time do you want to spend on it? How much money do you want to spend? It's totally feasible now for anybody to start to do this. It's just a matter of saying, okay, I have a hobby where I game, like let's say every Friday night I get together with my friends and game. Maybe I'm not going to do that for a while because I'm going to have to spend those Friday nights for the next month learning how to do this 3D printer thing. But then when I show up again on game night, I'm going to have a box full of really cool, figs to play with. So.
Yeah, I subscribe to Instructables, and if you've got a paid account through them, you get access to Autodesk's Tinkercad.
Oh, that's a great program. Yeah, that's a nice one.
And the nice thing about that is it's all done on your browser.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to, it's in the cloud then. So, you have your own library that you have available. You can download those files. It's really kind of handy. So if you're a DIY crafty kind of person, like I tend to be, having that Instructables account and then having that be a part of that. I mean, it's not anything you pay extra for. You pay your Instructables fee, and that you get that included, which is kind of a nice option to have. So,
yeah, one of the things that people should keep in mind is just quality. We didn't talk too much about that, but my experience now is that between the FDM and the SLA printers, the quality is getting pretty close. SLA is still a little tighter, but again, it's a higher cost. But if you're somebody who wants to print something for yourself for a little game action, then I think that a higher end FDM print is probably going to be fine. If you're somebody like me who wants to sell minis occasionally, I set up a sort of a side business called Tactical Game Systems, and I sell some smaller miniatures that I've 3D printed there, and I'm also working on getting some resin prints made for selling. Nice. And those prints have to be super high quality. Like the masters that I'm getting done right now that are going to get sent out to a caster to make molds and start to cast have to be very smooth. So each master, is going to cost me like $60 to print. But then we're going to be able to create a model and resin, duplicate that, just in the standard old-fashioned way of creating a mold. That's going to bring the cost of those minis down to like $10 or $15 each, which is what you need, in this day and age. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, wow. That is really cool. Oh, I could talk about 3D printing all day long. I love it so much. And you talked earlier about like the multiple extruder, the multiple head extruders, so you could actually print in multiple colors on the same print, or multiple materials in some cases. That's
really nice. And sometimes what you'll do, I was talking about support material, you'll have one head printing your support material, which is maybe a little less expensive.
Sure.
And then on your other head, you'll have your nicer material that's actually the object you're creating, which is kind of nice. And they do have, again, you're not going to have this in your home, but if you go to someplace like Shapeways or one of these other 3D printing houses, they have 3D jet printers now that print in color. So you can actually send them a 3D model in color, let's say of a figure of your, fiance, and they will print that for you, and it'll come back. It looks like it's been painted.
Sure.
The quality is not as good as some of us might do for some of the miniatures we work with, but it's going to look pretty nice, and it's going to be in full color, which is pretty cool. So.
Yeah, and one of the other things too is after I get into this for a little bit and I understand a bit more about, the different materials and the best programs that I feel I work better with. I've kind of decided that like when I retire, I want to, there's a couple of organizations out there that you can be a part of a community, and they actually will print limbs for children that have had some kind of accident where
Gotcha.
they,
Yeah, very cool.
they've, lost maybe a hand or something like that. And prosthetics are they're still kind of expensive, but organizations like this will match you up with a child that, is looking for a prosthetic, and you can, help print that and help. That's just one of the wonderful things about that community is that you can help these children, get a prosthetic and be able to do a little bit more of the things that they want to do, which is really awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Again, you're just seeing this technology in every area it gets into. It starts to change things, and 20 years from now, the kind of manufacturing that's going to take place, it's going to change a lot of things. And we could talk some other day about, the dystopian future of the robots taking over the world. But the reality is it's going to make the world a better place because you are going to be able to print things like a generator in the middle of, a country where maybe it's harder to get the materials and the know-how to be able to build something like that. You're going to be able to, send a file to somebody and they can 3D print the parts to make it, which is going to make things better all over.
And 3D printing is going to be critical for interplanetary travel. To be able to take a bulk set of material that ideally would be recyclable. So when you're done using that wrench that you needed, you can recycle it and then reuse that to print something else. But, if you're going to get to Mars, you're not going to be able to drag everything with you there. So having a 3D printer to, allow you to print some of the materials to get you through until, more material can be sent or the actual items that you need can be sent. That's all going to be an important part of that whole process. So, I mean, it opens so many doors for so many things. It's mind blowing. And, that's got to be cool to be a part of that, Dave. And
it is. It's a lot of fun. We're already in architecture. You're seeing them print buildings.
Sure.
They have special machines now that they're large and they're kind of slow, but they can basically 3D print a building, and that's what you're going to do on Mars. You're going to scoop up that Mars rock and you're going to turn that into the cement that you need, and you're going to start 3D printing structures. Now, whether those mostly are underground or above ground, that's like a science show that we're not doing right now. But, the fact is that you're going to have the technology to be able to do that. It's just going to make a lot more sense. So,
and to be able to in areas that may be devastated by hurricanes or natural disasters, to be able to print housing for people, even temporarily, is going to be, a huge boon to mankind, moving forward. So, I mean, there's just so many, we're talking about little miniatures, but the possibility and these machines are out there to do even far more large scale. I remember, it was a maker shop, I want to say in Canada, and they were doing a live feed. They had kind of done all the work, the measurements and everything, and they 3D printed onto a trailer bed. They printed a trailer basically that you could throw behind a car and go camping.
That's cool. Nice.
And it took a long time to print.
Well, yeah.
But
again, that's just technology. I mean, when I was younger, The computer that I had was so incredibly slow that it's ridiculous to even think about it. 20 years later, look at what we have now. I've got a computer in my pocket.
Oh yeah.
So the 3D printers are going to get faster. Maybe 10 years from now, maybe 20 years from now, it's the technology is going to change.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a lot faster and cheaper.
I mean, if you were to show somebody a smartphone in 1985, they'd burn you for being a witch.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this.
My first basically Microsoft PC. I remember going a 30 meg hard drive. I am never ever going to fill this thing up.
I remember, what was it? Probably 1998. I bought my first 1 gig hard drive and swore I would. Oh God, what am I going to fill this with? And I spent $150 on that 1 gig hard drive. And now in my pocket right now, I've got a 64 gig flash drive in my pocket, which is, full of music and other files that, I can take anywhere. And that's just been within the past, 20 years. Technology just moves so fast that the things that we're working on now just build exponentially upon what we're able to do in the future. It's just fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Looking through a list of questions here, and I think that we've covered a lot of the questions I think that we had to talk to you about. Especially, the quality differences. You're talking about using the epoxy. There are some people that like for props, for people that go to like sci-fi conventions and things like that, people will, and you spend a lot of time cleaning it up, but they'll use Bondo even to try to smooth Bondo's some of that out.
So these are model kits too. Bondo's nice.
I have a question for Dave here.
Easy to work with, but yeah, and there's a couple of groups on Facebook that I'm part of. One of them is a Star Trek props group. Okay. And some of the things that they're able to create with a 3D printer, I mean, you would never guess it was 3D printed by the time they're done finishing it.
Sure.
But it was. And a lot of times it's weapons or whatever, but they do other things, technology like tricorders and communicators and things like that. And, they look really nice. So again, we're just seeing that technology sort of move in on something and kind of take it over in a way. But,
no, and being able to prototype things. So if you want to,
and that's really where I got started.
Yeah, I just it blows my mind. Yeah, Glenn, you had a question.
Yeah, Dave, could someone in theory with a 3D printer, I don't know, print out like a McCready miniature for the
thing? Yes, they could,
and sell that to a friend of theirs
right now. He's one that no one else knows. I'll just tell you. I'm sure you guys won't tell anybody.
It'll be our secret.
That's actually one of the models that I'm getting up on Shapeways right now. I'm trying to get that character going. So what we did was we had a project at one point where a client came to me and said, "Hey, I'm building a model of the flying saucer crashing from the movie The Thing that John Carpenter had done. And what I want to do is I want to have the figures. There's a scene, and I'm sure anybody who's seen the movie knows what I'm talking about when I describe it, but there's a scene where they're kind of on the cliff looking down at the crashed flying saucer. And there's Kurt Russell, his character, and then two guys next to him. And so the client wanted a 3D model of McReady in his little outfit looking down at the flying saucer. So we 3D modeled that and 3D printed a very small 1/72nd scale, basically 1 inch tall version of this. We had to use the SLA printer because nothing else could print that because the detail was so tight. That was quite some time ago. But we can take that model and blow it up to another scale. So what I'm trying to do right now is do a 4-inch one that's sort of similar scale to like those Star Wars action figures, action figure scale, basically. So it gets to be a little expensive on Shapeways. Something like that's going to cost you like $20. But, you know, the detail's going to look pretty nice, and then you're going to be able to paint it up the way you want to, and you know, put that out someplace. So yeah, but again, for something like that, like if someone comes to you, I do some board games as well. One of the things I do with tactical game systems is trying to design board games and you know, miniatures and things like that. And one of the things that we've been able to do is basically take the design that someone has for a board game, like say they want a monster or they want a special character, and model that special piece. And with that 3D model, even if they're not ready to 3D print it, they can take that and use that as an example for something like a Kickstarter and say, this is the image of what this print is going to look like, whether it's something that they manufacture or whether it's something they let you download and print yourself. You know, that's the hard work. The 3D printing is almost easy compared to what it takes to build that model. So to build a character, you're looking at, you know, it's probably you know, a day's worth of work or something like that, you know, depending on what kind of software you use and how skilled you are, you know, and that can be a couple $100. I know people that won't even touch a 3D model like that unless, you know, it's like $500, but they're going to give you a really nice 3D model that you could use for, you know, manufacturing in China if you wanted to, or, you know, doing whatever kind of casting, you know, you want. So yeah, Glenn, you're absolutely right. It's totally feasible.
I remember seeing you had posted a prototype a while back. So
yeah, that was a fun one. Unfortunately the FDM printer that I have right now just doesn't do a good enough. The quality's not good enough for me to be able to use that. And like I said, the last time I printed it, I tried something a little different because putting prints at different angles on your printer will help them print sometimes. You know, having it stand up might not always work. Sometimes you might want to lay him on his back and print him. It might actually be a little faster to do that. But the last one I printed, he didn't have any legs. For some reason, there was something wrong with the file, and his legs didn't print out. So the rest of them look great, you know. You know, those are, you know, the kind of issues that you have with 3D printing, which is why I have a little camera set up watching the 3D printers all day. And I can bring that up on my phone. So if I'm away from the office and I'm printing something, I can actually bring it up and say, oh, hey, look, it looks like that's having a problem. And then I can try to cancel it, you know, remotely. So.
Oh, wow. That's cool. When watching, I was telling you about the gentleman that does the stuff in HO scale, and he showed some examples of where he didn't put the supports in the right place. And even with the SLA, you could see how it was starting to arch in spots because he hadn't put the supports in the proper places, and it went horribly wrong.
Yeah, it's rough. I mean, you know, you ask anybody who does 3D printing, you spend 12 hours waiting for something to pop out. You know, it's a lot worse than like a cake. You know, with a cake, you're waiting an hour or two, but with 3D printing, you know, you spend all day waiting for this thing to come out, and then suddenly, you know, a piece falls off or something's bent the wrong way, or
yeah.
There was a site, I'm not sure if it's still up, but there was a site that was just 3D printer accidents. You might want to look it up. It's basically all the problems people have had with 3D printing and some of the explosions of objects that have been created. It's an art form unto itself at this point. I mean, really.
Oh,
yeah,
sure.
I want to say Jolly Blackburn from Kenzer.
Yeah.
I think he does a lot of 3D printing, and I think he had one where it started on fire while he was
No.
So
it's been known to happen, you know. So again, it's you know, an FDM printer is basically a hot glue gun, you know, that's on a track.
Yeah, I suppose.
You know, I mean, it's, you know, it's a lot higher technology. Obviously, it's a much nicer hot glue gun, but you know, it gets really hot and it can cause a fire if it, you know, if you're not careful. I mean, that hardly ever happens, but there's a chance, I suppose. You know.
Wow. Yeah, because those nozzles get really hot.
They do.
Depending on the material, each material has its own point that it needs to be at heat-wise for it to flow properly, because you can have all sorts of issues if it's too hot or too cold.
Yeah. What you don't want is a clog, and that's, you know, I've had to deal with clogs before.
Oh God.
I actually went out and bought a new head for one of my FDM printers because I was just sick of having to clean this one out. It was clogging way too much. So I actually bought a print head that was about half the price of the printer that I originally bought. Put it in. I think the printer was $200, and I bought $100, print head. Plus, I also needed to go to Shapeways because the printer wasn't working at the time, and print out a bracket so that I could attach the new print head to the printer in order even to be able to use it. So it gets to be a little pricey, but again, if you love what you do, then you're going to spend the time and the money it takes to make it happen.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you spend the amount that it takes for you to actualize the things that you want to do.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If you want to make high quality anything, you usually have to spend a little bit more for the better quality tools. And that's just, doesn't matter if you're a carpenter or somebody who, works with clay or, carves wood, whatever. Or even like a friend of mine's dad has got a wood lathe, and yeah, you can get, cheaper chisels for it, but they burn out faster. They dull faster. So you spend the money for the higher quality steel that can keep an edge longer, and you get better results. So
yeah, one of the other types of printers that, along this line, they have an SLA system that uses LCD projectors. It's a little bit different of a system than the one that I have and that I'm used to. But I noticed with those printers that the cost is going down. They're a little bit easier to maintain. And because they're based off of a projector instead of a laser, they're just a little easier to deal with. The quality is maybe not as tight and smooth, but they're getting much better. And I really think that that's a technology in the future that's going to change things. You're going to see more of us who like miniatures being able to print these higher quality pieces faster.
Yeah, and actually that gentleman I was telling you about who was doing this stuff in HO was using one of those LCD projectors.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And
different resins, so I think it's a little more cost effective. I've seen the printers, as low as like $700, which
he said his was like around
pretty inexpensive.
Yeah, he said his, and I can't remember the name of the brand right now. The gentleman's name is Luke Towen. And I think he said it was like around 500 or 550.
Okay, yeah, that's
that
a
particular
good
printer. And it just kind of blew my mind that, to be able to do SLA at at that cost, at that price point.
I think it's probably, a year or two from now, we're going to have those printers on the table fairly easily, and they're not going to require as much maintenance or as much tweaking by the end user. That's what I'm hoping for, because I'd love to have like 3 or 4 of those just lined up, printing minis. But we'll see. Again, for somebody like me who's sort of doing this, as a player as well as somebody who wants to be able to get some of his ideas out there and see some of my spaceships on your game table, I've got to go for a little higher quality. And that just means, got to have a bigger budget. I've got to make sure that my architecture company, like the work that I do there, is going to help, this other part of the business or this sort of, more fun thing that I want to do, help each other out,
Sure.
But it's been hard to do because architecture buildings, the kind of designs that people want to see in 3D in that market require a lot more work. The detail level has to be spot on. The quality, like the lines have to be all straight. There can't be any bowed sections or anything that didn't print right. And that gets to be kind of expensive as somebody who has to print, because you're going to end up printing things 2 or 3 times before they're perfect. And that's sort of the issue we're at right now. And that's just a technology thing. Again, in a few years, I don't think we're going to have those problems. I think that the technology is going to be much better. And there's going to be more options, which is going to bring the cost down.
And folks can take a look at the work that you're doing with Tactical Game Systems by going to tacticalgamesystems.com.
Yeah, and you'll see some of the miniatures that I've created out there.
They're beautiful.
We also have a Facebook page as well that you can check out, but I'm not sure that I think the website actually has more examples at this point.
Yeah, and if you click onto like research and development, it seems. Oh no. Was that? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, all
Research and
right.
development. There's a huge listing of these beautiful ships that you've worked on here. Um, and I like the fact you've got one ship, and then you've got a penny sitting next to it, and it looks like the amount of detail that you have in that little tiny ship is staggering, and it's like maybe two pennies in length
Yeah, that
equivalent.
was a small one. And I think that's probably the one that you pointed out is the smallest one that I printed. One of the things to keep in mind, if anybody who has their own 3D models or that's trying to create their own, every scale that you print at is going to have a slightly different model. I tried to print that model initially with the original 3D model I built, and the guns were too thin, so they didn't actually
Oh,
print. The little
sure, yeah.
spiky parts just disappeared because the thickness was so small that the printer didn't know what to do with it. It was just too much detail. So I had to go back in and then thicken up the guns. We had to make, or I had to make the barrels a little thicker, thicken out the wings in certain parts, so that when it printed, you actually had something there. So it is a lot of detail, but every 3D modeler has to think about the end use, you know.
Sure.
And sometimes, and I've had people do this to me. I do sometimes some. I hate to say the Paramount IP, but sometimes people will ask me to do a Star Trek ship for them, and you know we change them a little bit so they're not exactly the Enterprise or whatever. But you know, those models, although they sometimes they look awesome when they get printed out, because it's, if you think about the way the Enterprise looks, like you've got one behind you right now, those warp engines with those little spindly wings, or the pylons that hold the engines together, those things are really hard to 3D print because they're so thin, you know,
Sure.
and the engines just pop right off, you know. So it's one of those things that when you're doing those prints, somebody may come to you and say, hey, I want this to be a smaller scale. Well, yeah, I could 3D print this thing that I already have built, but when I do that, it's maybe not going to work right. I actually need to go into the model and change it, and that's going to cost a little more money, or that's going to take a little more time, and
Yeah.
people don't always think about that. But yeah, just, I mean, just looking at some of the images that I have on the website, you can see
Here, I'm
that,
going to
you know,
I'm going to
there's
do a
3 or 4
screen share.
different versions of the same model. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
So
I'm
you
going to
can
do a
pan down
screen
and see
share
some of
here
those
so
other
folks can
options.
see that. And yeah, here's like the uh, tip of the hat to a Star Trek type ship.
Yeah, that's actually
Um,
the Shangri-La that was built, or that was designed by Bill Krause, who's a great modeler and spaceship designer. He created this and it won a couple awards. You know, he's one of those guys that you know gets a lot of accolades for what he does.
I
So he
bet.
allowed me to build his ship in 3D, and then I was able to create some 3D prints of it.
Ah, that's absolutely beautiful. And this looks like something from Space 1999,
Yeah,
almost.
I've got my own line of what I like to call the hard sci-fi
Sure.
spaceships.
Yeah.
So these are ships that are maybe, you know, 50 to 100 years into the, you know, supposed future. They're very you know, realistic looking. They don't have huge warp engines or anything, because they're all based on, you know, sort of standard rocket drives and nuclear power and things like that.
Sure. Yeah. It's just and you've got some tanks. You
Yep.
can see just a little bit of the striations here,
Yes.
but
Yeah. So one of the things about time and quality is that if you want your print done fast, you're going to turn the quality low,
yeah,
so that you're going to see those striations. You're going to have some thicker layers, and that's going to allow you to print a little faster. If you want something that's super high end for like a master that you're going to send somebody to duplicate or something, then you're going to turn that quality up very high. So instead of waiting 2 hours to get your little tank printed, maybe it's going to take 8 hours.
but well worth the wait with the
I think
final
so.
result. Yeah,
I think it's worth the wait.
absolutely.
You know, I don't know. And you can see there's different colors. You know, we can do clear, we can do black, we can do gray. That picture is an example of what we do after we print the models. We'll put them through a ultraviolet light bath, in a sense, and that will help harden the model. It becomes a little more brittle, but it's a little easier to work with then. It's not going to be
Sure.
soft.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I think that's a curing station there. Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly what it is.
Oh, it just, and for those of you who are listening to the audio version of this, check out the YouTube version because that's obviously going to illuminate what we're talking about right now. But the work, especially this ship here with the ring around,
Yeah, you can only really make that with a 3D printer. I mean,
yeah,
you could make it by hand, but that was one that I wasn't sure it was going to work. But
it's
you can
beautiful.
have some pretty cool objects, created. But it does take time to develop. I had to print that probably 10 times before I finally got it right.
I
And that's an
bet.
example. That's not even a final print. So
Uh, yeah, I think if we look at your Facebook page, yeah, here we go. We've got a more finished version and
yep.
painted as
Yeah,
well.
I sent out a bunch of prints of what I would consider pretty close to the final masters. I sent those out last year to different modelers, miniatures gamers, and they did a great job of painting a number of the pieces for me to use for some marketing shots. So
Yeah, I know I saw one in this like kind of a gunmetal gray. I saw one in blue. It was absolutely beautiful. Yeah, you got a lot of great interpretations on that particular ship for sure.
well,
Oh,
hopefully
that's
we'll have them out there in the next month is my goal, to at least have some Shapeways models that people can print at sort of the basic spaceship combat scale, like fleet scale or whatever they call that. Um, and then eventually we're going to have some resin models as well that are based off of those 3D prints. So a little more cost effective, but still pretty detailed.
yeah. When you're talking about Shapeways, that's I'm just gonna show a quick shot here of the website. It's a marketplace where you as a person, as a consumer, can look at what people have available, but folks like Dave can actually create a store so that he can offer his wares for people who are interested for particular things to be able to purchase. So it's kind of like a neat little e-commerce community specifically for 3D modeling, which is really kind of cool.
Yeah,
Very
it's a
cool.
nice site. And they do give you a number of different options for the different objects. Not everything you try to print can be printed in every material, because they do have different tolerances and different
Sure.
densities and things. But for the most part, there are a lot of options out there, and it again, it's a little pricey, but I like to look at it like if I'm going to make some miniatures, I'm going to use those for a long time. Like if I'm really going through the process of custom making a miniature and it's going to be exactly what I want, there's a reason for it. And it's probably because I want it to last a while. So I'm willing to pay a little bit more than something I may pick up, 10 Space Marines or something for, maybe the same price that I paid for this one miniature, but those 10 Space Marines, they're just grunts, right?
Absolutely. And even if, somebody is, say, developing a game that they want to, maybe put on Kickstarter, it would be
Yep.
nice to have actualized pieces that you can offer in, promotional shots and things like that, where people can get a good sense of, what they'd be getting as a final product. So,
Yeah, and I've worked on a couple of board game miniatures, which has been kind of fun. That went right to Kickstarter. It's a cool process because you get to work with the designer, and usually the thing that you're building, no one's ever built before. So
sure. Yeah.
the challenge as well as a fun little project. So
Oh, that's very cool. So, if people want to find out more about you and what you do with Polygon Forge, with tactical game systems, where are the best places for people to find you, Dave?
I would hit us up on Facebook. That's usually where you're going to get the newest information. That's where we put all of our updates. And then check out our website. And like I said, in the next couple of months, we're going to have a store set up there so people can check that out. And we're always going to update the R&D with some of the newer stuff we're doing. I work with a couple other friends. One's a woodworker, and he's been doing some really cool miniature things that also use lasers and 3D printing and stuff. So, we're trying to get a couple of different, sort of product lines put together that, should interest, some of the people that are listening to this. So those should be up there eventually.
Yeah. So, look for tacticalgamesystems.com, or you can find this on Tactical Game Systems doing a search in Facebook. and look for the cool ship that you'll see as the main image. It's absolutely beautiful. This, yeah, man, this has got to be like one of the coolest jobs ever. I think if you're really into no, I mean like if you're really into like the architectural design and you love games, to be able to just think of something, imagine it, and be able to build it and hold it in your hands when it's all said and done. That's just got to be so gratifying.
It is. It's awesome, and it's I've had some buildings built, and it's exciting to see your the house built or this large building, and you want to go there and hug the building because like you made this cool thing and someone actually built it, but miniatures is even better because I didn't put the bricks up, I didn't install the glass, I didn't when a building's built, I just maybe drew some cool pictures of what it was going to look like when it was built, or maybe was lucky enough to design part of it, but with the miniature, I've came up with the idea, I built it in 3D, I struggled to print it, hopefully not too long. I finished it, I painted it, and then I'm the guy who's like running the game, or I've got my pieces out on the table and there's smoke where it got blown up or whatever, cotton balls and who knows what else, but like that's the thing that I made. It is super gratifying, it's a lot of fun. And for people that haven't experienced it yet, again, the technology's there, it's not that expensive. Go out there and maybe it's not your thing, but I bet that you got a friend who has a 3D printer, or that somebody one step beyond, your friend who's got a friend who has a 3D printer.
Sure.
And ask them, to play around with it, or ask, if they can print something for you. Because most people are like, oh, I would love to print something for you because I always print the same junk, and now I want to do something more interesting. So, it's fun.
And folks in larger cities like Milwaukee might be able to find maker spaces where they'd be able to.
That's another thing we didn't really talk much about. I mean, there are a lot of different options out there. You just got to find the right group that has the right equipment, and chances are you can get something for free or for a very low cost. And you really got an expert doing the work for you because these people have done it so much.
Yeah, I think that would be
the issues.
Yeah, a great benefit to being able to go to a maker space is meeting with other people who have already gone through the pain and suffering, and you can learn from their heartache and the struggles that they went through, and they can kind of mentor you so that you can get to where you want to be skill wise a little bit quicker, and possibly make fewer mistakes, which always feels always feels good. But to be able to just more quickly and accurately take that thing that you've got dreamed up in your brain and bring it to life is so wonderfully gratifying. I used to make signs for a living back in the day, and there are still some around town that I made that are still up after 25, 30 years. And it's always still gratifying to go, I made that.
Yeah, it really is.
So it's a good feeling. So, all right. Tactical game systems. Find them on the internet. Find them on Facebook, and keep an eye on keep an eye on Shapeways too for the store that you're going to be opening too. So, good quality stuff. Good looking stuff.
Thanks. It's fun. Nice to be able to do something fun that is also cool, and who knows, other people find it interesting sometimes.
Especially gamers, especially, they're always looking for, speaking for myself, I'm always looking for something new, cooler, that more matches my vision of what I'm doing in a particular game. So I'm sure that there are plenty of people that play space-based adventures that are looking for great new looking ships that they can integrate into their games, and you're opening up other lines too, you said, with your other friend who does more mixed medium stuff.
There's a company called Morning Wood Makers, and he's really starting to bust out some really interesting like tiles, like dungeon tiles and things like that. There's a couple of companies that do it, but he's doing it all in wood, and the designs are pretty interesting. It's different than some of the other things that are out there. So, we're again, we got to get sort of these small makers together and try to create bigger things as we get together and work on these projects. So whether it's 3D printing, wood cutting with the laser, or just some of the other technologies that are out there that we can bring together to make gaming more fun and more interesting for people. That's really what we're all about. So,
and to be able to have that ability to more tailor it to the game that you're playing, as opposed to something that's been mass produced. You can add more of your personal touch.
Quality as well. Yep. I mean, you can have a really nice, dice box or something, that's very high quality and very nice. And if you're the kind of guy who loves to game, you want to show up at the game table with something really cool looking or really different, you're going to go to a small shop, whether it's an Etsy thing or whether it's, something on Shapeways, you're going to buy or spend the extra money to get this cool thing made so that you've got something a little different than the standard generic, card case or whatever it is for your game. And that's the thing. That's what this technology is allowing people to do. If you're somebody who's really into like Dominion, if that's your favorite board game ever, right? You can go out there and whether it's something you 3D print or whether it's some kind of wood thing, you can make special boxes for all your cards the way that you like them, or a special carrying case. The technology's there. It's just a matter of having like the willpower and obviously some money to be able to have people help you out to create these ideas and to make them. So.
Yeah. Oh, it's just, it's an exciting time to be alive and to have access to this technology now. It's just, it's mind blowing. Absolutely. All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap things up. Thank you so much I think we went a bit longer than I think we expected to, Dave. But we had,
there's a lot to talk about.
I mean, like you said, there's so many different types of ways to print, be it SLA, be it FDM, be it what SLS we were talking about, all the different programs to actually design this stuff. We could do like another 2 shows at least.
Definitely could. I'll be happy to come back and talk some more when you guys are ready.
We would be happy to have you back. Absolutely. And especially as you get your Shapeways store open, and as you expand more with your tactical game systems, and we'd love to keep touching base with you and see what you're doing.
Excellent. I'd love to be able to show you guys how some of these miniatures and some of this 3D stuff can feed directly into some game design and board games, because it's a whole process. I'm only touching a little bit of that process, but I'm learning a lot about it and really trying to develop ways to make it more efficient so other people can come in and do some of the same things that I'm doing, but hopefully not make some of the same mistakes that I've made over the last couple of years. So. I think I lost you.
Did we lose Brad?
No, I think we did.
No. No.
There's a day. What's that?
Oh, there
we lost you.
Oh, did you? Am I back?
Yeah. You're back.
Hey.
But we lost you.
Oh,
you were like completely gone.
Oh, something must have happened with my internet. Oh, weird. Okay, well, I'll start that little section over. Hey, if you want to chat with some of the other hosts or other listeners of this Galactic Network podcast or any of the other podcasts that our network has available 24 hours a day, you can go to gncasts.com/signup, and we can add you to our Slack team. And you'll have the ability to interact with us in real time. Some of us work on the internets in our day-to-day job, and we always have Slack open. So we're there. And we have a gentleman that does a show out of the UK. So he's 6 hours ahead of us. So when we say 24 hours, that's fairly accurate because he works in IT as well, and he's got Slack open. So we're there and available to talk to us. You can go to gncasts.com/signup. For more about this podcast, including show notes, contact info, and more, you can go to gncasts.com/adventure. Also, if you have any questions or comments about anything that you've heard on this Galactic Network podcast, we covered a lot in this particular episode. So if you have questions, feel free. We can even pass some Dave's way and get some answers for you if that's what you need. We're more than willing to do it.
I'm happy to answer questions.
And I'm sure if you go to find your page, the Tactical Game Systems on Tactical Game Systems. I want to make sure I'm saying it so fast. It might sound like Tactical Gaming Systems. I'm not saying that. Tactical Game Systems. You can definitely send a Facebook message to Dave directly, and he would be able to answer questions as well. So you can also get a hold of us on our voicemail and texting number, which is 805-328-3966. Again, 805-328-3966. Or you can go to gncasts.com/contact. We do read, listen to, and appreciate any and all feedback you may send our way. Please subscribe to this Galactic Network podcast by going to gncasts.com/subscribe, or you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, or any other places where fine podcasts are offered. We think we're fine. That's subjective. So there you go. Also, last but not least, I want to thank Mark Wooldridge from Central Battery Music Works, who constructed our music theme that we use for our audio version of the show. So again, thank you so much, Dave Garacci, for joining us and talking to us about tactical game systems, about 3D printing. And like you said, there's so much information on this. You could do a deep dive on this and really look into 3D printing. We encourage and invite people to do so because it's such a fascinating and interesting way to add to your gaming experience for tabletop or board gaming. Even some card games that integrate actual like meeples or other pieces. It works for all of that. So thank you very much, Dave.
Yep, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
I want to thank Glenn, certainly last but not least, for joining us once again. Where can people find out more about you, the B-Movie Bunker, Mist Runner, and Demon Eater, sir?
Where indeed? Okay, I'll tell you.
You're just gonna leave us hanging. All right.
You can find me primarily. A lot of my stuff is on Facebook right now with Demon Eater RPG and Mist Runner. The B-Movie Bunker is kind of on I'm not sure how long hiatus, but for a while. I just have too many other things on my plate, but you can still check that stuff out along with my short films at the B-Movie Bunker on YouTube and Guy in a Bunker Productions. You can follow me on Twitter at Guy in a Bunker or just check out guyinabunker.com.
And also, if you're within driving distance of the Milwaukee area, you might want to try out the Oak and Shield gaming pub experience.
Grand opening May the 4th.
May the 4th be with you, sir.
Yes. The Marauder Mac and Cheese is so freaking good. Mac and cheese with bacon jam.
Sorry?
Mac and cheese with bacon jam.
Oh, I'm in love already. Bacon jam. You got me right there. I'm looking forward to the next time I come to Milwaukee, just so I can give you all my money for games and then buy a lot of cool food. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us at the Adventure Party. May your characters never die and your adventures always be epic. Thank you and good night.
Yeah.